Good morning and welcome back, all friends and new friends. Thank you for joining again. Please note that this meeting will be recorded, and all recordings, as usually, will be posted down on this website, as well as all the demo material. So today we're going to talk about MQ Advanced Message Security. We shorten it usually to MQ AMS. And it's a part of MQ when you get the MQ Advanced upgrade. So I'm going to do a short presentation and then a live demo for some of the initial concepts. I've got a bit more complex demos planned as well. Now, one thing about MQ AMS is that up to about so where we're going with MQ AMS is that up to about 2 years ago, MQ Advanced wasn't extremely popular in South Africa. A few of my customers was running MQ AMS, but never in a very big way. And then about 2 years ago, it starts to turn. And we think it has got something to do with all the GDPR initiatives, as well as all of the security attacks on our organizations in South Africa. Which means that actually most of my big customers in South Africa today owns MQ AMS, and even some of the smaller ones. What is, however, true is that not all of them is actually using it. And lately I've received a few requests around this area. In fact, throughout since about September last year. There were several requests around MQ AMS and how to use it and what to do it for. So I've decided to do a small presentation and a demo for today, and let's see where that takes us. So from an MQ point of view is that if you don't run your messages from MQ with any security around it, it means that typically over the line, and as the data is in rest, that's when it goes into a queue, you can actually see the data portion, which of course is not good if you're running confidential information. So from the very beginning, you can add security as it flows over the line. So that has never been an issue. So you would add TLS on both sides, and at least as the data flies over the line, it will be encrypted. But there was always after that, if you don't add your own security around your messages, as that message goes into the queue, you guys know if you're an administrator, you can really pick up that message, have a look at it, and then see what is the detail of the message. So you can either then decide to do some security around the messages yourself, or if you've got MQ Advanced, you can use the MQ AMS to set it up, which typically means that there's very little impact on the endpoint applications, if not no impact on the endpoint applications. And it's an administrator action to actually implement MQ AMS. So show you what is MQ AMS. So there's a few typical techniques that are not very sufficient in protecting your sensitive data. But you can do things like TLS connections and full disk encryption are very simple techniques for providing a good level of security, but don't give full protection for your sensitive data. For instance, if you do full disk protection, you've got the right access rights in there, you can still have a squeeze at the data that's sitting on the disk itself. And typically we call that data, your data at rest, because it's not moving between two queue managers or moving from a client to a queue manager or the other way around. So your TLS connection protect against packet sniffing across your network links. So that will be definitely a first port if you to put TLS in that environment. Then if you add disk encryption, then disk encryption prevents your data center administrators from viewing your content at rest on the disk. And if you've got, however, a malicious user that gains access inside the virtual machine, and they can see the message data unencrypted on the disk. So still an issue in that area. Also, a user with admin access to the queue manager can easily read the messages as it sits on the queue. So you can just open that queue from an MQ admin point of view, browse it, and you can see all the data inside that messages. And I'll show you that a little bit later. Then a malicious application that can read from the queue receives the messages in plain text. And I think over the years we've seen that specifically with certain channels. Guys, if you're not on mute, if you don't mind going on mute. If you've got a malicious application, it's not so difficult to break into MQ, specifically if you've already got access to the network and or access to the machines, because typically the security is not so good in that environment. So what we do with AMS? So if it's an application-initiated encryption that we're interested in, so IBM MQ provides built-in support for end-to-end encryption of the messages. So the data is encrypted before it leaves the sending application, and it can only be decrypted by the intended receiving application. All right. So this is my sending application. Let me switch on my pointer. This is my sending application, and there's my receiving application. So encrypt it here. It will be encrypted all the way, and only when this application has got the right credentials, you can actually encrypt the data. No changes to application source code. Okay, so I'm just going to mute again. No changes to any source code is you have to do on any of the sites, and then encryption and decryption is handled automatically by the IBM MQ client libraries. And it's a very simple way to meet requirements for sensitive data compliance scenarios. And even in the very simple demo I'm going to do today, you will be able to see what I mean. So then there's end-to-end encryption. What does actually happen? So your administrator will generate a public certificate and a private key pair representing your application. Then application B's public certificate, you're going to give it to application A as part of the deployment. So you move this key from who's going to read it, and you give it to the guy so that they can encrypt the data with a key from application B. Then application A sends a message, for instance, hello world. Then before it leaves the machine, MQ client library will automatically encrypt the message body using application B's public certificate. So it won't say hello world anymore, but some garbage text that you can't read. This encrypted message is then transmitted to the queue manager, also over a TLS channel. And as it arrives on the machine, the encrypted message waits on the queue to be consumed, and it can't be read in plain text by administrator or any malicious actors out there. So it will be encrypted as it sits on the queue itself. Then the message is still encrypted as it moves over the line to application B. And the MQ client library decrypts then the message body using the private key from the application that only this application has got. And it can then, application B can see then the message as hello world. So it's a normal encryption kind of scenario out there that we would expect from any place out there. The important ones in here is that it is the MQ client libraries that's actually implementing the encryption and make and encrypt your data for you. So the application actually hasn't changed. It's exactly the same application as it was before encryption. Of course, this makes it really good for guys out there that's got hundreds or thousands of MQ applications out there, and they don't want to go and touch the code for all of those applications to actually implement encryption. Okay, let's look at Queue Manager initiated encryption. So what about IBM MQ can also support encryption of messages where you don't control the sending application. Okay, so it's somebody from outside your organization that is sending data to you. So this is great for data sent to you by external partners or suppliers, or where you don't have access to the application deployment environment. So you will send, this application A will send a hello world a message. As it enters your queue manager on the channel, the messages are then encrypted on the receipt at the queue manager side. Then it will flow over whatever channels as encrypted, arrive in the target queue manager still as encrypted, and this application then the queue manager will decrypt when they are transmitted out towards the client. So you see there's this little bit here, then that won't be encrypted. Still better than nothing out there, and it is actually protected inside your organization. So what we get is end-to-end message level security. So MQ Advanced Message Security provides the capability to encrypt messages in transit and at rest between your sender and your receiver. And I think we've seen some of the benefits we can get in that environment. Just as a last slide, how do we actually do error handling? So MQ Advanced Message Security defines an error handling queue. So there's a queue, you'll find it as one of the system queues, to manage messages that contains error or messages that cannot be unprotected. So defective messages are dealt with as exceptional cases. So if a received message does not meet the security requirements for the queue it is on, for example, if the message is signed when it should be encrypted, or decryption or the signature verification fails, then the message is actually sent to the error handling queue. And of course, then you need to take some action from that point of view again. So a message might be sent to the error handling queue for the following reasons, and this is just a subset of what of why it might end up there. So the quality of protection is a mismatch. So there's a quality of protection mismatch exists between the received message and the definition in the security policy. If there's a decryption error, the message cannot be decrypted. If there's a PDMQ header error, it gets prefixed by a header called a PD. So the AMS message header cannot be accessed for whatever reason. If there's a size mismatch, the length of the message after decryption is different than expected. This might be an indication that somebody is trying to inject data into the message. Okay. And then encryption algorithm strength mismatch. The message encryption algorithm is weaker than required. And of course, the unknown error. Okay. Unexpected error has occurred out there. Maybe any questions now while I'm just going to switch my screens.
Yes, Francois, hi, it's you.
Hi, you.
You'll probably still it'll be fresh in your mind, the ask that we had of you and your team a couple of days ago. So I think that probably is a step in the right direction. If, to your point, if someone does fiddle with a message, if its integrity is not the same as what it was when it was sent, it will move to an error queue. Correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, that probably has some potential there. I mean, we probably don't know who did it, but at least that altered message won't get necessarily consumed by the target system.
Exactly, but we might still know who's doing it. I'm still doing some investigations there, just to see what is actually the full error control environment. I just haven't had enough time to have to look at all of that.
That's fine. It does seem like we're stepping in the right direction. But thanks for that.
Okay, so I've shared now a screen which got a few headings. There's got a few programs on that is open. Let me just see. I've got some other things that's open as well that I want to kill. Okay, so for this demo, I'm going to first do. So I've created 3 command prompts on my screen here, and everyone is going to represent a different user. I've also got MQ, the IBM MQ on Cloud. So I'm actually going to send these messages to IBM MQ on Cloud, but it could be a local queue manager as well. So in here, what we do is we create a few credentials. So if I go to my application credentials, you will see I've created 2 credentials in here called, all right, called Alice and Bob. And you will know, if you're long enough in the MQ world, we always use these 2 kind of users out there. So I've created Alice and Bob. Alice is going to be my sender of messages, and Bob is going to be my my receiver of messages. I've also opened up my MQ Explorer locally on my machine, and I've connected my MQ Explorer to the queue manager on the cloud. And you can see from a queues point of view, I've got a few queues in there. There's a dev.q1, dev.q2, dev.q3. There's an alias queue that I'm not going to use, and I've got a dead letter queue sitting in there as well. Then in what I've created in this queue manager is called a security policy. So right at the bottom here of my queue manager, you see I've created a security policy specifically for dev.queue.1. Let me open up the security policy. In here, it needs to be have the same name as the queue that it is protecting. And I'm going to apply this policy to all messages, which also say that maybe I don't have to apply security to certain messages coming in. I'm going to use a signing algorithm of SHA-1, and I'm going to only accept signed messages from the message originators listed below. So I'm going to only accept messages from Alice in this case. All right. So if you've anybody else, you will not be able to send messages into this queue. And then I'm going to use a message encryption algorithm of AES-256. And then I'm going to say that only if you are Bob, you will be able to read messages from this queue. Okay. And that's literally the security setup I've done on this side. Now, I'll show you afterwards the security setup I've done on the client side. I just first want to do the demo. Okay, so there's my queues, and I don't need that. All right. So from a client point of view, is that I've created 3 command files. I'm going to run Alice, and you see in Alice what I do is for MQ demonstration purposes, you know, and for clients that can set their own user ID inside messages, and when they connect to a queue manager, there's a mechanism in MQ that we only use for sample setups. Okay, so maybe it's not the best for production environments, but I set my user ID in this session to be Alice. I'm also set my MQ server. That's how we connect to a client with a client channel over the network. And from my previous demos, you would have seen that if I create a queue manager on the cloud, I can get this connection file that's coming back to me, and it sets to me my host name is important in there and which port it's listening on, and then some channel setups that I can use for connections as well. So you can see over here I've set my connection to be using cloud.admin.svr.con as my channel name. It's a TCP/IP channel, and there's my host name, and my port in round brackets after that is 31611. And then I've also already created a key store for my clients, and I'll show you later how I've created that. But I'm pointing this environment variable MQS key store conf to where my key store file is actually sitting. And then I've done the same for a few other users. This is my Bob, who's going to run in the middle. And just to show how things are actually working is, let me minimize this window, put it out of the side. This one I've created a user called Francois. Okay. So from this window, you've seen now in my cloud setup, I've got 2 credentials set up there called Alice and Bob, but there was not one for Francois. So I'm just going to copy a command, copy and paste it in here. So I'm going to try and put with a client connection to dev.queue.2. Remember, this is not the queue with the protection. The protection on is Q1. Now, if I try to put that message in this environment, because I'm going to the cloud and it's asking me for the password, I don't have a password for that user because I've only created something for Alice and for Bob. So I can try and put in a password in there, and it will come back and give me, I hope, an error message. Yeah, 2035, which means I can't. So if you don't MQ return code 2035, it'll say MQ return code not authorized. So I'm not authorized to communicate with that queue manager. Now, if I actually go into that environment and I create here a credential for Francois, I add and generate an API key for me, and I download this credentials. I'm going to open it up with Notepad. Let me show you how that looks like. This is the credential coming back. And now I'm going to grab this. Is my API key there. Copy it. And if I try and do this transaction now again, is the put, and I give it that password. Now you can see I get access to the queue. So I can put a message in there that says from Francois. And I can put that message on the queue, and I can end that application. So let me go back to my MQ Explorer. If I go to Q2 and I refresh Q2, there's the message on the queue. I can actually go in there and I can browse that message. And there's the message. And if I scroll a little bit right there, you see there's my message data that says from Francois. Now, let me try and do the same message, but I'm trying to connect to Q1. That's now the queue that is protected. Q1, put the message, put the key in there. And now you say, I can't connect to that, and I again get a 2035. So to the queue that's open, I can get connection to the queue that is not open, dev.q1, because it's been protected, remember, by this policy down here. All right, I can't get access from this user because it only allows users access from those two users I specified in there. So let me go back now to my Alice environment. So if I want from the Alice environment, I'm going to try and put messages. Let's first try and put a message to that dev.q2. That is, remember, the open one. So my password for Alice, I've saved earlier. There's Alice. So I can put a message from Alice in there. And let me do the same, but now this time I'm going to put a message to Q1. Now remember, when I tried to put to Q1 from my user ID, Francois, it failed. Let's see if the demo guard is on my side. And yes, it at least allows me to put a message in there. So I can put a message in there from Alice to Q1. Now let's go back to my MQ Explorer. Okay, so if I go back to my queues and I have a look at Q2, let me just refresh the messages. You can see there's two messages now in dev Q2 and there's one message in dev.q1. Now from this point, I can say, let me browse those messages. I should be able to see both of those messages in clear. There it is. There's both messages, the first one and the second one is sitting there. Let me see if I can browse this message on dev Q1. Remember, I'm a full-blown administrator on this queue manager. Browse messages. And you can see I'm getting an error message back. So even me as an administrator on this queue manager, I can't see any of the messages inside this queue. All right. So I suppose that is some protection that is sitting there. Now let me go to Bob. Remember, we said that Bob can actually read messages from that queue. So if I initialize Bob on this side as well, there you see there's my Bob initialization out there. And if I now do, let's see if Bob can read from that Q2. So that is the queue that is not protected. Asking me for Bob's password. I saved that when I created the key. Slightly short. And there you see it's consumed those two messages that was in Q2. All right, so from Francois and from Alice. In fact, if I refresh this should drop now to 0. That is correct. This application typically times out after about 30 seconds. Yes. Now let me consume. Remember, I could not see the message in dev.q1. Let me try and consume it from Bob because we gave Bob access to do that. It doesn't want to paste in there. Copy. Paste. And there is that very message that was put from Alice to that message. So Bob has got access to read that message. So he can go and read that message. So any questions so far?
Francois, Zane from MQ. I have a question. We've got clients at Absa that use queues to actually browse through messages and look for certain references. So let's say, for instance, the queue is encrypted with AMS. Is there a way to enable certain users to be able to browse the queue?
Yes, you can. It's like any other queue security. You run the auth on it, and they should be able to browse the queue. Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So let me show you now what I've done to make this setup work. I will make sure this file is in the demo directories as well. So this is my setup exactly as I've done it for this demo. So on my sending side for Alice, you've seen I've set those two there to give a username in my command prompt, and to my client side channel to the queue manager, and similar for Bob on the other side. And then I've tested it with simple AMQS put and get C commands in there. Yes, I've set up the key stores. So from the Alice command, I've first tried to do this command. I was trying to make a directory in my home drive, users alice.mqs, but in my Windows platform, it didn't allow me to create a folder in there. So I've decided to rather create for me a folder in a directory called delmi/alice, and the directory name is MQS. Then I've run the command, run MQ AKM. These commands are all part, after you've installed MQ, these commands will be part of your MQ bin. So I've created a DB in there for Alice. Then I've created a key for Alice in there. You see some basic password and things like that. And I've created certificates in there as well. You can see I've got this one didn't work for me because historically I've kept the users directory in this environment. So just so that I can go and try it again. So the two commands I've actually executed was that one against the Delmi to create a DB, and this one to create a certificate for Alice. And you can see this is the information you've actually seen on my side inside the queue manager on that that I've showed you where to do the setup on the queue manager, who can send messages into the queue and who can't receive it. So there's the qualified name and so on information in that field out there. I've done similar things for Bob. Okay, so in Bob, there's the DB I've created, there's the certificate I've created. Then I've run this command, actually from the command line, I've connected with run MQSC to my queue manager. You can connect, I don't have to do it via the MQ Explorer. I can do a run MQSC command from a command line to connect to my MQ queue manager. And I've actually set the policy in there by the command line. All right, that one over there. You can see it's all the information needed in there to set up that policy. And this was for another demo I've done, so I didn't use the alias queue this side. Then what I need to do is I need to swap out the public keys between Bob and Alice. So I've changed to the directory. There's a command to extract, okay, the file into Bob public home. And then I've added that to Alice's DB, okay? And of course, the other way around, I've extracted the public side of the key for Alice, and I've added it into the Bob key database. There's a verification setups you can run to make sure that everything has worked. It actually show you the list of certificates in both of these DBs. Then you can create a key store. So I've created a key store, a conf file, and inside that conf file. So let me just open up my directory. So if I go to my C drive, there's my C drive. Tell me inside Alice, there's MQS. So you can see there's the files. Okay, so I've created this keystore.conf file in here because it's got the information in for MQ on what to look for. So inside that file, I've added the, this is a CMS key. So there's a CMS key store. I just pointed it to Alice. And that certificate that was exported there, there is the name of it. Okay, and I've done the same for Bob. Its own keystore.conf file that I've created with this information in it. And then I've done the tests as I've showed you now on how to do it. So when any of these things is missing, of course, those kind of things will not work. You can even do browsing if you want to. And I've showed you how to the additional steps in here when I'm creating a user that doesn't have access, how you get a 2035 error codes coming out of it. Any questions? I think any MQ administrator should be able to replicate this in about 10-15 minutes flat.
Francois, just a question from my side. So with regards to your sending application, receiving application with the encryption and decryption, is there any kind of latency as part of that process that we need to consider?
Is there, sorry, latency?
Yeah, any added latency?
Yes, there is. There's actually inside the performance documents, there is a section on AMS. And it shows you for the different encryption, depending on which encryption you use, what is the overhead that you can expect in that environment. So yes, there is a latency. If you do this with MQ version 8 or I think even 9.0, the overhead is actually bigger. A lot of our customers complained sort of in the 5 to 6 years ago that this is not fast enough. So for the later versions of MQ now is that they've rewritten the MQ AMS completely, and the performance is actually not too bad. But yes, there is still an overhead, but you'll find in the performance documents, you'll find the graphs and how they've tested it and all of those kind of things. So yes, there is definitely a bit of a latency, and depending on which algorithm you pick, you know, it might be bigger or smaller.
Thanks, Francois.
Okay.
Francois, Peter.
Yes, Peter, which one? Down in Cape Town, Stellenbosch.
Yeah, so just a quick question. How difficult is it to implement advanced message security on ZOS?
As far as I know, there's 1 or 2 additional things you need to do, because of course you need to tie in with some of the Z security environments as well. But apart from what you've seen here, there's not additional things really that you need to create. So it's straight. I've never done it before. I don't have my own Z in my basement, but I sat next to a Z guy about 2 years ago. And it wasn't too bad to implement it at all. I'm just going to fire up my presentation again. If we go back, and I'm going to keep it like this because otherwise it shows on my other screen. Just a little bit, there was a question a few weeks ago when we were doing the event streams, and there was a question, is there a support for the Avro schema in event streams? So event streams on-premise includes a schema registry that uses Avro as the format for defining schemas. So yes, that is there. And then event streams on cloud are currently working on a schema registry, also using Avro, but only the enterprise version. So if you do the light version or one of those, it will not have that support in yet. They expect that support for the other sizes to be available the middle of this month. Okay, this is directly from the developers. Of course, this is not a commitment from IBM. You know all the T's and C's. All right. So to use Avro without the registry, there's also an interesting link in here that if you want to try and use some of the areas that if you don't have a registry available to use Avro. I think that question was from Jock, if I remember correctly. Then a little bit of news. If you want some free training Okay, we've got some free training. We've made cloud packs, free training available. If you go to ibm.com/services/learning/cloud, there's a whole lot of free training available there. Have a look at it. You can get these badges as well if you go through the training, and you answer the questions correctly and so on. Quite interesting. And then there's quite a bit of other training as well that's available at the moment. But for a starting point around cloud packs, and you can see there's for all of the cloud packs, there's training available. I think most of you guys might be interested in the cloud pack for integration, and in there it will handle all the different products in there as well. Okay, that is it for today. So any questions, any other object around integration, or of course on AMS? Now's the time. Just unmute yourself and talk to us.
Francois, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
It's Emil. How are you doing?
I mean, not bad yourself, man.
Not bad. So I joined over like 2 questions. What is required on the channel for TLS enablement? First question. And then the other question
Say again, what is there?
what is the changes needed on the channel for TLS enablement? So how do you tell the channel to use TLS? Right? And then second question, can you have more than one policy per queue?
Okay, yes. The second one, as far as I know, you can have more than one policy per queue. I've tested it to add some other users, and it was actually allowing me to do more than one policy. And then the TLS, I can't remember how to set it up now. I haven't done it this time because it's in the cloud. It's automatically set up for you. What you do need to set up, you need to set up a cipher spec, which cipher spec do you want to use. And there's for IBM on Cloud, they recommend some specific ones. If I just go into the cloud, maybe I can find that again. MQ on Cloud, I can close this one out.
So on the cloud, by default, you have TLS 1.2 enabled.
That's correct. Yes, by default, it's enabled, and I don't think you can really get rid of it. But you do have to set a cipher spec for it.
Okay, so then there could be a potential challenge if you're sitting on on-premises site where you don't have TLS 1.2 and you want to talk to a cloud queue manager because of the different.
No, that is true. Okay, but there's some interesting development in that area.
Okay.
If we look at 9.1.5, that is in beta right now.
Yeah.
There's actually a TLS negotiation on the channel, and you can set that negotiation. So if there's 2 queue managers, you can say negotiate for me to the highest level between the 2. Okay. So then it will default to the lower one. But you can also say if you don't have at least this level, then don't start. Don't open the communication at all. So there's I think 3 different settings you can do in there to do it, and that is in beta at the moment. I don't know exactly when 9.1.3.5 is coming out, but it is actually quite soon.
Cool.
So that should solve that problem for you at least.
Cool. Yeah, well, let me say to you, it's nice weather where I am, so I'm hoping the weather's great with you guys too. But thank you very much, Francois.
Actually, a pleasure, Emil.
Thank you very much, Franco. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you for everybody that's dialed in from across Middle East and Africa, and I know there's even 1 or 2 European guys that's dialed in, and of course all my South African buddies. Nice to hear you again, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Stay safe.